and Freedom Conference, which was held at the Influence Church in Anaheim, California. I know many of you were there or watching online. Thank you so much. It was a packed house and an incredible event. Well, while I was there, I was able to sit down for a brief time and interview their keynote speaker, General Michael Flynn. When I watched what happened to you during the Obama administration, leading into the Trump administration, that's where I think so many patriotic Americans that have watched your career are so upset and so offended on what they did to you. And I remember that day that you were sitting with the other hierarchy in the intelligence community, and after reading what happened to you, understanding that you were the only one with the intestinal fortitude to stand up and go, no, ISIS isn't the JV League. No, there's more here. The administration is hiding something. What inside you said, I got to do this?
Well, because I had spent 5 years fighting them in combat at that time. And and I fully, deeply understood not just the level of, top level of knowledge, but expert knowledge of what we were facing at that time, at that moment. And we had just done a full review of the ISIS Al-Qaeda landscape, and I think I think the number that I remember is they were operating in about 24 countries. So at that moment in time, I had just been presented a briefing prior to going in to prepare for those that was in front of I think in front of the Senate. That was an open hearing in front of the Senate, and the other guys at the desk there with me were Clapper, Brennan, and Comey, very famous picture.
Yep.
And when asked down the line, I was the last person to be asked because it was the protocol. They asked, what do you think? What do you think? And the other three basically said, they sort of followed the party line. We got them on the run, and we're winning.
Yeah.
And when they got to me, I said, well, I don't think that they're quite on the run. They're operating in, and I think it was 24 countries. Yeah. I may have that number reversed. It may have been 42, but it's been a few years. So I'll keep it at the low ball number of 24 countries at that time. And they were actually growing in strength in places like Iraq and Syria, particularly in Syria. So that meant that they were essentially mobilizing to come back into Iraq. And also what we saw, this shift of an ISIS element, a large ISIS element going over to Afghanistan to start taking on our troops over there. So there was no way in the world that ISIS was on the run. And so that kind of, sort of queered the deal for me, right? I mean, that made it so I didn't, sort of toe a line that I think that the administration at the time, the Obama administration, wanted to hear. And
could you fathom, though, that it was going to lead to what it led to this whole witch hunt against you and then President Trump to try and defame your good name, your family name, and that you were going to go through this hell for years because of one decision that you made the right call to tell the American people?
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's not a JV league.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so the transformation of my life from that moment to where, I was told, okay, you're out of DIA a year earlier than normal. Normal rotation is about 3 years. So I was out in 2, and they're trying to characterize it as other than what it was, which was just you're not towing the party line, so to speak. And then sort of getting involved in the political life of the country, because not for me, it wasn't because of that. It was because I saw the country and the culture of Washington, D.C. moving towards what we're facing right now, which is this drive towards socialism. And then you have these other elements that are really hardcore Marxist. But what the administration did in, like, let's just say 2015, 2016 to kind of mesh some the last 5 or 6 years together, what they really did was they were persecuting not just me or Donald Trump, they were persecuting the American people. And that's where the American people are today. They feel like, hey, you screwed us, to use a little bit harder word than I normally use, but the American people feel
they have been. We feel that way.
Well, the American people, that's the way American people feel.
Yeah, we do.
And so, like people always say, I'm sorry for what happened to you. I don't feel sorry for myself one bit. I feel sorry for this country because a duly elected president was never allowed to do the things he needed to do. And what they forgot was that the American people elected the president and allowed him, like we always do, allow him to choose the team that he's got. And then all of a sudden, all of this undercurrent of evil. I mean, that's the only way that you can describe it.
Yeah.
So
I firmly believe that.
So here we are today, sitting in Anaheim, California at this Health and Freedom Festival, and we're still in this sort of fight that we have for this country. Yeah. And it goes back to not Donald Trump. Donald Trump just kind of got in the way of the power that they were taking over, right? The power of a few over the many versus a system that we have, which is the power of the many over a few. That's the difference between communism and a constitutional republic, right? So we're in this struggle right now, and it is a huge struggle. It's for real. It ain't a conspiracy theory.
No,
this is
sure
factual.
Isn't. Yeah, you were talking about the wokeness and all this stuff, and how this woke mob has really destroyed the country over the last couple of years, as far as I can see it. Talk about the move now, because you dedicated your life to service. You always put service before self. You reached highest pinnacle, general, right, in the military. When you see the videos, the books that admirals are pushing in the Navy, they're pushing in the Army, the CRT stuff, the wokeness videos with the CIA, are we ready? Is that good military readiness? How does that make you feel? Because I talked to some troops that are in, and they're just scratching their head going, they're teaching us this, why?
Yeah, so the one, without getting into the weeds of how what somebody believes, what one general or one admiral believes, and some of the stuff that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, recently said and is getting hammered for, he's got to live with that himself. He's got to live with those kinds of statements and whatever it is that he believes, and whatever it is the other Joint Chiefs of Staff believe and what they think is going to be best for the institution of the military. The one thing that I do know, and the one thing that we are designed to do, and it goes back to the very first general of our Army, the very first commander-in-chief that we had, George Washington, we better be prepared to fight and win our nation's wars. We better be ready and trained. And if CRT is going to help me fire my missiles better, or shoot my rifles better, or stick somebody with a bayonet if necessary better, I don't see it. I don't see it. So the purpose of our armed forces is not to be a social experiment for whatever administration's in power, right? It's not. We should not be used as this experimental institution of our country. What we should be used for, the military, is to be prepared, be ready, be really seriously well trained. And we better, when we get into a fight, when we're directed to go fight somebody, we better fight and win, and not fight and participate like we've been doing since the Korean War. Yeah. We've been participating in wars, and what we really need to do is we need to avoid them by being ready, being trained, and having that sort of snarliness that we need to have in the military sometimes that says, I don't want to mess with that guy. Right? I don't want to mess with that military force.
Other nations used to think of America.
Right.
We don't want to mess with them.
Right.
I don't know about today, especially with the commander-in-chief we have.
I think that, part of it is that we have adversaries out there around the world, like China, that they're looking at us and they're going, has America lost its sting, right? Has America lost its sense of self, and do we lack, because we're over here doing this nonsense social experimentation?
Yeah.
I know troops in the military. I know a lot of active duty troops still in the military, and I talk to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines all the time, and just to get a sense, because I, as a senior officer, senior retired officer, I want to continue to help the institution to go out and talk to young people and encourage them to join the military. When I got moms and dads coming to me going, my son is thinking about getting out, my daughter is thinking about getting out, and I'm like, and I ask them why, and this is a lot of conversations recently for, Mark Milley, who's listening, or should be listening, that conversation is happening more and more. Now, maybe it's only anecdotal for me, but it's enough for me to say something's not right, and we can never allow the American people to ever feel anything other than total trust in the leadership of our military institution. I'm not talking about the Department of Defense and all the civilians and all these political appointees. I'm talking about the uniform, those that wear the cloth of this country and are going to lead our men and women into harm's way, to possibly give up their life, for our country, right? Yeah. Give the last true measure of devotion. That level of trust between the institution of the military, the cloth-wearing military, and the American public can never be broken. And I will tell you, it's probably, and I would say this very bluntly, it is fraying on the edges. So be very, very careful how far you go with this social experiment.
Yeah, I think that leads me to my next line of questioning, which is about, we're talking about CRT, but you said a couple things about the military being ready for war. We know that this administration has talked about, and they've hired someone, a retired general that you probably know, to root out extremists in our military. Last night I was speaking with somebody that was at this conference, and they brought up the word a cold civil war. Do you feel like right now, with the way the mainstream media and the Democrats and BLM and Antifa, all this nonsense over the last 16 months has been tearing at this country to divide us, to me it feels like we are headed towards a cold civil war, if you will. I mean, they've got us infighting with each other. Like you just said, foreign nations are looking at us, scratching their head going, what's going on with the U.S.?
Happening?
What's going on with us?
They ain't just scratching their head and wondering what's going on. They're thinking about what to do about it, too. That's the other aspect that people tend to... They're not
Russia,
just out
China.
there watching from the bleachers. They're actually on the field, and they're going, okay, how do we take advantage of this? So that's clear. And don't think that they're not. So I don't really... I'd have to really give some thought to, a cold civil war. So it's the first time I heard that phrase. But
me too. Somebody said it last night.
I mean, what the reality is that and I know, like the person that you're talking about, right? I mean, I've served with all these guys. I've known these people a long time. In many cases, served with them in units in the military, served with them in combat situations, and I give them their due for their bravery and their courage and their service to the country. What I question is their political alignment. And so if you're an appointed civilian in the government, it's one thing because you're a political appointee, and so I guess you're going to kowtow to the administrator that's in the White House. So that's okay. So that's the way you're going to be. But for those in the military, you have a responsibility to the Constitution, but you have a responsibility. If you don't believe something, you can't pretend like, well, if I stay in, I'll be able to fix it and I can work around the edges. No, especially if you're a 3 or 4 star and you're a appointee at that point in time and you're confirmed by the Senate, you have an obligation to the country, to the institution, to the oath, that you have to make a decision. Do I believe in this nonsense? And if I don't pretend like you can fix it. Sometimes you just got to say, you know what? I can no longer serve because I don't believe in what it is that I'm being directed to do. Even though it may be legal, ethical, and moral, although I'd question the morality, but I just would, and that's me, I'm speaking for myself. But even if it meets those 3 criteria, right, legal, moral, and ethical, that doesn't mean that you still, as an individual, don't have your own freedom to think about what it is that you need to do and what's best for the institution. And I think that some people need to start thinking about whether or not they should continue to serve or not at those leadership levels. Never mind what political appointees are put in, whether it's whether it's the Secretary of Defense or some of the cultural advisors that are in the Department of Defense. And I think that's really, I think it's something that we have to understand. I mean, when we look at God, we could get into all conversation about Afghanistan and Iraq and about China and about other adversaries, Russia, Iran. I mean, this communist ideology and this sort of radical Islamist ideology that exists out there that doesn't believe in what we believe. Okay, they don't. It is competing. At times, it's adversarial. Back to the beginning about the military institution. The military institution is not a social experiment, Dan. The military institution is designed. It's designed to fight and win our nation's wars, period.